In the last series of videos, I talked about the tiger's tooth breaking the skin, going into a muscle, and how blood vessels were disrupted and our immune response was there. We're all familiar with COVID and viruses, and now what I'm going to try and do is explain how viruses manipulate that process to their own advantage. This data is taken from an amazing paper by Professor Pristiel and his lab. And actually, in COVID, they shared their lab findings and lab videos on YouTube. And I'm incredibly grateful for that because it was really interesting to listen to them and incredibly informative to listen and hear their research. This is the tissue factor pathway. We covered this in the last talk. You have tissue factor exposed, binds factor 7, and generates trace amounts of factor 10A. And what you can see here is the 10A is released, and that acts on factor 2 to convert 2A thrombin. And that's picking up what I mentioned to you before, that thrombin has these really two broad streams of action. One is to convert fibrinogen to fibrin, and the other is to work via protease activated receptor. The protease activated receptors are on many cells. There's type 1, type 2, and type 4, and they have a plethora of effects. This is a picture that I remember from COVID. This is the picture that we used to see behind the newsreaders' heads. We always used to see this beautiful symmetrical virus with these spike proteins on it. And this is an envelope virus. We're all familiar from biology that viruses go in and they sort of hijack the cellular machinery and the DNA code of a cell, and they manipulate it, subvert it to their own ways and means and processes. And this model is just supposed to be showing an envelope virus it's hijacked that cell process, reproduced its DNA, reproduced its proteins that it needs, and it's budding off and ripping itself off from the cell membrane. And then you've got a new virus particle here, again, beautiful and symmetrical. But it's not pristine, bland cellular membrane that it's ripping off. Going back to the first slide in this video, you can see a slide that a cell that's infected will upregulate tissue factor, and we showed in our previous videos an increased expression of tissue factor. And so when the virus buds off and rips the membrane with it, it actually takes tissue factor with it. It takes a lot of other cellular receptors and proteins with it too, but tissue factor is the one we're really focusing on here. So instead of this beautiful symmetrical virus that you saw initially and we saw behind the newsreaders' heads, it's much more complicated. Again, this is a virus, it's an envelope virus, and you can see a spike protein, or this purple blob is supposed to represent a spike protein, but it's actually also expressing tissue factor. So it can link to and activate your hemostatic systems. And that's a key advantage that it's using and manipulating. This slide here, I love this slide. This gold bar is just a gold atom attached to the end of an antibody. This antibody is picking up tissue factor, and this electron micrograph here with the black dots on it is individual gold atoms being picked up by an electron micrograph. So you've got an envelope virus, and we're proving that it's expressing tissue factor on it. The top 4 wells have no thrombin in them. The bottom 4 wells have thrombin in them. And the white plaques that you can see are little white plaques of virus growth. And in cells with thrombin, you have increased number of viruses. What's that mean? By manipulating this process, it appears to give the virus enhanced rates of reproduction and increase its infectivity. So this is the virus being extremely clever and manipulating our immune response, our basic immune response, to its own advantage. COVID did this extremely well. All we're showing in this slide is if you blocked tissue factor, you reduced the amount of virus of these white plaques that you saw. And it's just identified that tissue factor is the key part to block in that process. So we've covered how viruses can manipulate our immune response. We're now going to talk about how a common bacteria can manipulate our immune response in the next video. Thank you.